Okay, I'm Brett Chase. I'm with the Better Government Association. My colleagues, Jared Rutecki, Casey Toner, and Kate Drews,
Bless you,
are going to be, telling you, they're going to dazzle you with some interesting FOIA anecdotes and also hopefully answer some of your questions. So the BGA, they made you familiar with the BGA. You guys know what it is. It's a, for those of you that don't, it has maybe kind of an odd-sounding name, but it's actually it's a news nonprofit. We're all reporters, just like many of you in this room. It dates back to the 1920s when a group of business people, civic leaders, ministers, were just fed up with Al Capone's control of City Hall in Chicago. And decades later, they added the journalism. Probably one of the best-known stories is the Mirage, when the Chicago Sun-Times and the BGA bought a bar to catch city inspectors who were shaking down small business owners. That was in the late 70s. Pam Sackman was a young, Channel 2 was a young reporter for Sun-Times at the time. It was nominated for the Pulitzer, but unfortunately didn't get it. Today we do journalism about all forms of government in Chicago and the state of Illinois. We're here to talk about FOIA. Show of hands, who's used FOIA? A lot of you. Good, that's good. So I'll speak to, hopefully what we'll do today is give you some pointers. We'll give you the basics about, filing a FOIA request, but also, hopefully fill you in on some, some of the tricks, some of the challenges you're going to face. FOIA is a good thing. It's an imperfect system, but it's pretty good. If you don't want to go through, if you don't want to trust a public relations person, which you shouldn't, and honestly, there's a lot of information that's not going to be available just from simple press inquiries. FOIA is a good tool. So. Actually, I'd hope to. We don't have an actual FOIA up here, do we? If you go to if you Google bettergov.org and how to file a FOIA, you can see a sample. But there's no magic form. But there are some key points which I think are in here.
Yeah, we can probably.
Okay, so let's start off with, does anybody have any questions before we start? I'm going to have Jared go over some basic things about FOIA. He put together this nice slideshow.
Yeah, I guess just in terms of FOIA history, what we're talking about today is the Illinois Freedom of Information Act. The first FOIA law was the federal law signed by LBJ on July 4th, 1966. What we're going to cover today is the Illinois FOIA law. Illinois is the last state to sign a state FOIA law. There's also other freedom of information laws in other states, have different names, FOIA law, Public Information Act, whatever. But what we're covering today is the Illinois FOIA law, so that's the thing that we have the most experience with.
Yeah, and they do have, they all have different rules too. So.
Yeah, it's a different set for every playing field, I guess. But in terms of what FOIA means, I've got the actual law itself on the background of this slide, but it's that it says that public bodies, it includes a number of organizations we have here, administrative advisory bodies of the state universities, colleges, counties, townships, large list of organizations that are actually subject to FOIA, and you kind of have the couple of exempt organizations identified here as well. Courts are exempt. Federal agencies are exempt from Illinois FOIA in so much as that they're subject to federal FOIA, not Illinois FOIA. So it's kind of different rules there. But we'll provide you the link to this after this is over. We're going to have them posted on the site, so we're going to have links and things on here that'll take you to the actual wording of the law, and so that kind of helps you direct how the act works.
Most things are subject to FOIA. Legislators, individual legislators are not, judges are not, certain other people, ability of the courts, yeah.
What do you mean by individual legislators or not? Because doesn't the General Assembly have a FOIA officer?
Yeah.
Like, what would that cover?
But I
Just
mean, like,
the-
you can't get
communication.
You can't just get, like, every email from Mike Madigan, unfortunately.
Well, he doesn't have an email, unfortunately.
Yeah, well, yeah,
no, but what if I
did.
wanted someone like, more like Scott Drury? What if I wanted a specific email about he wants to outlaw FanDuel? If I wanted to see his communications in regard to FanDuel to see if he's getting money from a betting.
My
Las
understanding
Vegas,
is,
yeah.
I mean, some of the staff committee.
Like, is Steve Brown? Can I FOIA Steve Brown's emails? Or?
My understanding, somebody back me up on this, I think Steve Brown is actually a private.
Correct, he's a
contractor.
private
I think he
contractor,
got
so
fired.
he's
so
not.
technically, yeah.
So, that's kind of.
Yeah, but what communications can we get? None, or
You can get emails if they send it to the governor.
if they sent to the governor?
Yeah.
Or other,
So
Yeah,
anyone
or
on
other
that, if they
entities.
send to a school board?
Yeah,
City-
they
yeah.
send it to the
School
school
board,
board.
City employees
What about
from
the county
a-
assessor, like Joseph Barrios? Is he subject to
Yeah.
communication
Yes.
requests?
Yeah, Barrios is.
Okay,
Yeah,
perfect.
yeah, good questions. Anybody else?
Yeah, questions are good, so we have them, ask them.
It's like a,
Oh, there you go. Yeah.
kind of it's like a Ripple journalist or something.
I'm not a journalist.
2 months ago, and we have received no answer.
From who?
We're trying to find some information about
Sure.
applying for senior citizens exemption for someone who was a dead.
Oh.
We're trying to see if the children have applied for it.
Okay, so you sent a FOIA to the state of Illinois or where?
To the assessor's office.
The assessor's office? Yeah, they're supposed to, I mean, we're gonna get to that, but
Yeah.
you're supposed to get a response within 5 business days.
Oh.
And that just means that they say, either they fulfill it in those 5 days, or they say, we're taking an additional 5 days. And then by that, second, 5-day time period, they need to tell you something. Either here's your information with some redactions, here's your denial, and then we'll go over some of the things that you have some, things that you can do if you get denied. But,
Yeah, no
right
response
now-
is a denial.
But if if they no response, they're actually supposed to.
Don't they have to pay for? your-
They have to,
Yeah.
they have to give something up to you if they just ignored you. But, this is where it gets, like, where we have the benefit of having a lawyer, which I realize not everybody does, but, you could tell them that they're in violation of the law, which they are, if they're not responding to you within the 10-day period.
A lot of times too, like what we do, if we don't get a response in time, I mean, we'll call them every single day, keep following up, send emails, like, hey, where is this, where is this, where is this? It doesn't always work, but sometimes it does. If you can at least talk to someone and figure out like what's going on here, sometimes they might explain, sorry, this is like a really big request, we're working on it, we might need a little more time. As long as you're okay with that, you can work something out with them. Doesn't always work, but it's worth a shot.
The emails are good because it creates a record, and they have the copy of the record, and you have a copy of the record. And a lot of times, if I'm not getting a response, I'll tell them like how many days they're late on it, and I'll just send another one every day, reminding them of how the deadline just gets further and further and further, and then they usually get back in touch with them.
But let me ask, because I'm not clear, public access counselor, can you appeal before you actually get an outright denial? Or,
Yeah, I think in like that instance where you don't get any response, you can reach out to the PAC's office.
Yeah, it's gonna be another slide, but, so when you get denied and you feel it's unjust, you can go to the Attorney General's, public access counselor. And, any of you guys wanna weigh in on your, success or failure?
I had an issue where I asked for like a copy of a tape of a meeting regarding this 911 center, the software that wasn't very good, and they told me I couldn't have a copy of this tape because it was only being used by the secretary to make notes of this meeting, and since she was using it to make notes, it was considered a draft or whatever. But anyway, so they denied me a copy of this tape, and I appealed to the Attorney General. And then, like a year and a half later, I finally got, the response from them. They said I could have the tape, you know, and the tape of this meeting showed, you know, all these people freaking out about the software. So, you know, that is an avenue to go to. It just can take forever. But it's an option, especially if you don't have a lawyer.
Mhm.
So it's 5 days and then an additional 5 days if they didn't respond, but they have to give you.
But they gotta tell you they're taking that extra 5 days.
And 5 business days, so Monday through Friday, not holidays.
I feel like that happens like with like 85% of my requests they
Yeah,
ask for
me, it's
the
more like 95%.
yeah, 95%.
I got a question. Yeah. Because it also says you can do written FOIA requests, and I read that on the law that if they don't respond in 5 days, that they have to waive all the fees associated with it. And so if you do a written request, when would the time of the response be? When they send the letter or when you receive
The
it?
next business day. It's if you file it on Monday, the first day is
If I
Tuesday.
send them a letter, like,
Oh, it's the first
Yeah,
day
but
they
if I'm like-
receive it. It's the day that they receive it, not the day
and
you
then
sent
I
it.
receive it or the day they send it?
The day that they receive the letter that you sent.
And they have
is-
5 days
The
to
day
send it?
after that is
Yeah.
the first day of the 5-day period.
And they have to send it, not me receiving it, or
I'm sorry.
do they have 5 days to send the letter, or do I have to receive the letter within 5 days, or fax?
Weren't you sending a letter to them?
Like a
Sorry, I'm
snail mail,
confused.
like I wrote a letter.
Yes,
like,
if you
to-
write a letter to
yeah.
them, they have, let's say you write it
Yeah.
and send it on Monday. They receive it on Wednesday.
Yeah.
Thursday is the first day
Yeah,
that they are required to fill it. Then 5 days from there would be the following Wednesday, assuming no holidays.
Yeah.
They can file 5-day extension to you, which, yeah, if they send the extension letter in the mail, it always depends on how you ask them to send it. You can also ask them to send it via
Yeah.
email, then you would get the result immediately.
Yeah, are you asking if they have to mail it by that deadline?
yeah, because
So-
there's certain records
yeah.
I want that I know would be really expensive, like audio of
Mhm.
a specific discussion on a law, and so I was wondering, is there a way to kind of want them to respond after 5 days, so they can waive the fee,
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
Well, I mean.
making it as hard for them as possible, so
Well,
that I don't get it back in 5 days.
I mean, they could probably
Yeah.
dirty it by asking you to narrow something. There's all
Yeah.
sorts of sort of ways for them to dance around the
Yeah.
10-day period. So, you know, as much as it's easy probably to try to trick them, it's probably just as easy for them to sort of step left and dodge that sort of approach. So I'm not sure.
They're giving you a disc that's minimal, you know, cost, so
Yeah.
they shouldn't,
Yeah.
they shouldn't be able to charge very much for it. Anyway.
Thank you.
So, do you want to go over just the basics of?
Yeah. I guess we have here our FOIA requests. Kind of, we've gone over some of the basics here, but essentially, you have to make a FOIA request to the FOIA officer of every agency. It's a person who who has to complete a training within Illinois once a year. They're not required to register with the public access counselor who oversees FOIA requests in Illinois. They must respond in a timely manner, as we said, 5 days then with the 5-day extension, and develop a list of documents that will be publicly available. We have a couple of links in here. Like I said, we'll give you these later, but essentially these are kind of places you can find FOIA officers kind of at the state level. There's a few others when you get into different levels of government. When you're talking schools, each individual school district is going to have their FOIA officer somewhere on there. You may have to dig quite a lot in order to get to the point where you're finding the information, but it ought to be out there somewhere. And if you have trouble finding something on the website, usually you can call a government agency and say, hey, could you give me the name or contact information for your FOIA officer, and that may get you around the having to search it down. Yes?
Have you found that, since we have no money in Illinois, that the work is actually getting done? Are these people really still even working there?
How do you mean? Like, which do you
Well,
mean?
we don't, no
It's-
budget, no money.
The law
statewide.
doesn't excuse that, you know, I mean,
Okay.
if they, I mean, they can, you know, and they often do say that this is a burdensome, you know, overly burdensome request, and then you can work to narrow that.
Gotcha.
That's actually, we're getting a little ahead of the slides, but that's, you know, that's one of the options. Usually you're given this opportunity to narrow it down, and some, you know, and I might just interject that, like, you know, wording is very important, and we go over that too, but in a perfect world, we'd be like working with a dedicated civil servant, you know, doing the FOIA job, and I think actually a lot of these people are. The problem is they have people above them, and, you know, reporters, you should know this, that, you know, I mean, when a lot of government entities have FOIA committees, So your public relations person is probably at one of these government bodies is probably looking at it. The general counsel, which will be well above a FOIA officer, will be looking at ways to redact information, not give you everything that you want. I'd love to believe that we live in this society where there's these very transparent government bodies, but that's just not the case. They're going to look for ways not to give you the information under as they can argue it under law, and they have lawyers that are specialists in doing this sort of thing.
We got, I guess, what is a record? So I guess we've gotten to the who you have to send your request to, what you're looking for in records. This list of records include forms, writings, letters, emails, contracts, electronic records, data, and more. Like we suggested before, you can request these things in an electronic format, which is one way of at least minimizing costs, that it's cheaper for them to put it on email it to you or send it to you on a CD than it is for them to copy a series of documents. Can sometimes save you money that way. They're not required to create records for you. So if a record doesn't exist, you can't have them compile something, so that's often going to be a reason for a records denial in those instances. We have kind of a description of records that are included, and this is actually from the Illinois FOIA law that includes all of the things that are included in here. There's a number of things even beyond everything that's described on the board here. You also have videotapes of arrests, videotapes of other things. You have audio recordings. You have a number of other things that are also fit in here that are kind of in some form or another included on the what is defined as a record. So I guess that's the breakdown. And the thing that people use to not give records is there's a series of exemptions, I think, that you can probably flip to the next.
Okay, before we do that, Katie, you want to talk about audio and video? This has been a good source of stories for us.
Yeah, definitely. You can think kind of creatively about what you request. We've also requested browser history before, but there was one particular case with audio. I don't know if you guys remember, a couple of years ago there was a police officer who worked for the Metropolitan Water Reclamation District in Chicago, and he got caught on tape. It was it was the Illinois State Police had picked up his radio. He didn't realize it was keyed on, and he was giving a new employee a tour of the facilities. And on this radio transmission, he was talking about the secret drinking room that they had, a room where everybody would go to sleep. They literally had a pillow and blankets in there, a fridge full of beer. He also spewed all kinds of racist and sexist and horrible things, and this was all caught on tape. And our friend at Fox, our media partner, Dane Placco, he broke this story originally, but he couldn't get a copy of the tape itself. And so we sort of stepped in at that point. We tried to get it from MWRD. They refused. They said that this was involved in a disciplinary case and therefore it was exempt. We ended up having to file a lawsuit to get a copy of it. And when you do actually hear it, it's even crazier than it sounds. So that was kind of a little wacky, fun story.
How did he know about the tape to begin with? Like, how did he?
Did Dane originally know about it?
Yeah, how did he get with it?
He might have had a source. He got tipped off in some way. I'm not positive how he came to know of it. But
and how did you say the audio was recorded? Like
through, so he's a police officer, so he had his radio, and
Okay.
it was keyed on, and he
Okay.
didn't realize it. So the whole time during this tour, it's like over an hour long, he's blabbing away, and he didn't know it was being recorded through the Illinois State Police. So MWRD ended up getting a copy of this through the police, and that's how we tried to get at it in that way.
It's really entertaining, and in addition to just listening to this foul-mouthed racist guy, he tells you something about the inner workings of this agency. So this is they take care of our our stormwater, sewer water, but it's an agency that's had a long history of patronage and corruption, and according to this guy, there's still plenty of that still going on, and there's these rooms that they would create to go sleep and drink instead of doing their jobs. So.
Yeah, I forgot. He did say in this clip how everybody's clouded in.
Yeah.
So that was one of the first times where you get kind of direct commentary on something like that, so it was good.
Was it clouded?
I have a quick question.
Yeah.
For workers where they would require you to come in yourself, would you know that in advance, or is it something are they required to let you know that in advance? Is that a tool for them to use to maybe assume that?
Yeah, I've never actually been called in. I've always been able to get everything electronically, but have you guys ever had any experience with that?
Yeah, I have. They had one case where they wanted to charge us a ridiculous amount of money, and normally we ask for a fee waiver. As media, you can do that, and we don't usually have a lot of problems, but in this case they were being especially tough. Wouldn't narrow the price down at all, so the compromise then was that I would just go into their office, physically inspect the documents, take notes there. It's not the most ideal situation, but I think in that case it was probably being used as a way of trying to prevent me from accessing the documents. So I think that's a strategy they could take. But at the end of the day, you can say, well, if you're not willing to pay, you can say, I want to go down there and inspect them.
But they do have to give you a notice, and, I don't know if that's within just by 5 days, I guess you would just arrange when
Yeah,
you
it should
come
be
down.
within the response.
So, yeah, they're supposed to be responsive to you, by law, as I said, the 5 days, within the 5-day exemption, and those are business days, but, yeah, I've never actually had to do that myself. Anybody else? Have you had to do that, Casey?
To do what?
To have to go inspect records?
Oh, yeah. I mean, like all the time, they'll say like, oh, if we have to print out all these copies, it'll cost you $500, but, and.
Even with a few?
Yeah, I mean, but you could just say, oh, I'll just, go and visit, it'll be free, and they go, okay, that's fine. Then you can go and bring your little personal document scanner if you have that, and you can make your own copies.
Yeah, and by the standard of the law, you're supposed to be able to, once they've produced the records for you, examine them before you're paying for it. There's no sort of reason that you go, oh, I totally trust you, government official, that you have provided everything I need, and I will certainly pay you the $500 you want for that record request. You are, by law, required to examine it. Now, sometimes they will block you in that effort. I've had requests where I've attempted that technique before, and they've turned me down on an examination, but you are supposed to be able to examine all of the records before accepting them.
Yeah. What are the rules for that? I had to do that once, go and inspect records. And I had to select, because it's television, so whatever was visual for us, so it was like reading autopsies and all this crazy stuff, but anything that was visual, I kind of will make a mark, and that's what the company wanted to pay for. But they did have like a list there where it said that I couldn't take, screenshots or anything, so everything was just taking notes, and so I spent, mostly like half of my shift there.
You couldn't take pictures with your phone? Or?
What was that?
You couldn't take pictures with your
I
phone?
couldn't take pictures of the documents, no. I could just,
Who was that?
then I just told them, I'm trying to remember what agency it was. I just remember it was just looking over this case where it was all about autopsies and how they went to the scene. And so, I just looked for the more graphic ones and came back and said, okay, this is what we need to buy. So from $700, it went to like maybe $100 that we spent on that.
Yeah, and it's probably going to be a case-by-case basis on that. I think some places are going to be more flexible and some are going to be less so. I don't know, I can't say 100% what the ins and outs of the laws are in terms of allowing you to copy things. But I guess it's going to depend on who you're asking for and what their response is and how much they want or don't want you to have something.
Yeah, I would think you should be able to take pictures though, because they should be redacting. If there's something that's private on there, they should redact it before you get there. So I don't see any reason why you couldn't snap a photo.
Yeah.
So I'm not media. I'm just a pissed off citizen, and I'm wondering, is it more financially beneficial to be considered media, in terms of like, you mentioned the media exemption for waiving a fee.
Yeah, we get waivers.
Is it better for me to be media or citizen?
As a private citizen, your rights should be the same. As a commercial requester, if you're working for an insurance agency, if you're working for a law firm, you would qualify, I think, as a commercial requester, which means that they have more time to produce your records request. But as a private citizen, you should be entitled to the same time frame of response
That's all
I don't know so
yeah.
much about the fee waiver.
Yeah.
I think that maybe as an academic or a scientist, you might also be able to play. So I mean, if you played that card in a sense, I think you might also be able, because for the general interest of the public, you know, being able to have information for academics to research, for
Yeah.
other things like that, would be another way that someone could probably achieve a fee waiver.
And I could be an academic without being a student, or do you have to be?
It's probably
just be an academic
It's
and,
probably
yeah.
true. I mean, I
Yeah.
assume people write academic papers for
Yeah.
publication outside of schools. So,
If you're affiliated with a nonprofit too.
nonprofit is another way.
You have a question?
Yeah, I have a question and a comment. So I've been looking at ways to, I don't know, to get fee waivers, and I have the muckrock.org. People are nodding their heads. I don't know if anybody's used that. That seems like one of the ways that people have achieved fee waivers is just signing up and saying they're going to disseminate the information online, and then there's sort of like a pseudo media element to it. And then my question was about if you can speak to how disciplinary action would provide exemptions. So for example, I want to FOIA the Amtrak Police Department, and I know they're subject to FOIA rules. Would they be allowed to completely block me because they have an officer under investigation for murder? Or would they have to say, you know, just we're going to exclude this?
Yeah, I've worked with this a lot. I frequently pull discipline files. And the way it works in Illinois is if the investigation is completed, they have to produce, if it's completed and it results in some kind of disciplinary action, they have to produce it for you. But if they're currently working on it, if like, you know, some guy, punches out his wife or something like that on the train tracks, and they're investigating it right now, they don't have to give that to you. But you can ask for his like prior disciplinary history. Yeah, as long as they were disciplined. And oftentimes, like, if they appeal and they ultimately win, but they lose in the first round of the disciplinary process, you'll be able to get that too, even if they win at the end. So basically, if there's a result and it's over with, you can get it. If it's ongoing right now, they will not give it to you.
Okay, thank you.
And this is a federal FOIA that you're filing, right?
I've never done it before. I'm not sure. I mean, it's Amtrak FOIA.
Has anybody done Amtrak before?
I don't know, because I would think that the police would be local authority, but I
Okay.
guess it's dependent on what the
Yeah, I guess
authority of the department is.
Yeah, you gotta figure that out.
If they close it and he's innocent, is that foilable? If they decide case closed, he's not guilty, then can you get that information? Like the investigation's closed, but
if they make a
yeah.
ruling on it.
Yeah.
If they make a ruling on it, yes.
Okay.
Like if they determine that he's not guilty, if
Yeah.
there's like a board hearing that they determine that he's not guilty and there's some investigation that goes along with it, that should be made available.
We can run through the exemptions.
Yeah, and I guess we're going over exemptions. Exemptions to disclosure include personal privacy, private information, social security number, home address, phone number, drafts and internal memos, something that was mentioned earlier, unduly burdensome request asking for every single document you've ever posted on something. You know, you get 50,000 pages of something, they say, oh, it's too much work for this little agency to produce. Process and bids, law enforcement, administrative enforcement, some of the investigations with police and more. In a case where someone does say that something is exempt from disclosure, you should read the response carefully and judge for yourself whether what they're saying applies to your case, because oftentimes someone will say, you know, they're exempting for this reason or that reason, but it's not applicable in your case, so you can always feel free to negotiate back with the FOIA officer after you've received an exemption. Yes, I don't know if we want to cover exemptions or if we want to go on to sending FOIA.
I have a question.
Yes.
Sometimes in a case that we worked on, we were having a hard time to getting records from this police department, but then there was a lawsuit that had just been resolved. So the lawyer gave me everything. And then the police department eventually gave me, like kind of around the same time, but I got everything from the lawyer, but the lawyer didn't have, so all this personal information and all this, everything was there. And so I got the blocked one versus everything. And so we were having a really hard time as to whether we could use what was not, what we got from the lawyer, because some of it was very graphic, we were not gonna use it. But it was just that we were coming back and forth whether like, okay, well, you know, the police department blocked it from you, but then here you have all the.
Yeah, I assume you have to consider all of the damage that could ensue from something. I mean, you know, posting an officer's home address and social security number could be something that could be, you know, used against him at some point. Somebody goes, oh God, I'm going to steal his identity. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do that. But I mean, the details of the case for something with a newsworthy interest, I mean, the value of the public's right to know something is going to outweigh the right of a public officer's right to privacy. So I mean, you have to kind of weigh the considerations on a case-by-case basis and decide what's worth putting out there and what you need to protect. Because certain things, even if somebody gives it to you, it doesn't necessarily mean that you should publish or you know, share the information.
Yeah.
So, I'm thinking of a FOIA of public university information, and particularly it would be related to a healthcare request. So a you know, hospital medical center affiliated with state-owned university should be public. Obviously, medical information at the individual level is private, but trends and data should be public, but they're not going to want to.
Yeah, at schools you'll often run into an obstacle. I don't know if they will use FERPA or not, but FERPA is a very common exemption that universities use to knock out any personal identifiable information about students and things like
Let me
that.
ask you what you're specifically looking for. What are you trying to get at?
Actually, I mean, I don't want to totally give away the story idea,
Oh, sure.
but you know, there's so much in the news about the price of medical services, whether it be drugs, whatever, and there's so much varying.
Mhm.
So, you know, in terms of how you would go about doing that story, a private medical center is going to be more difficult to work with than a public. I'm
Yeah.
thinking going with university medical centers as a starting point.
Mhm.
So yeah, trying to get to the cost, right?
Yeah, I mean,
so that should be public information.
yeah, I would think so.
It's
I mean,
like how do you go
universities-
about crafting that request, and then I mean, just as an individual who's trying to get information about my own, you know, like how much did my mammogram actually cost? It's
Mhm.
not that easy. So, you know, that's really, you know, I think one way to do the story is to go with state-owned medical centers. They should be required to disclose it.
Yeah, I just did a story on the malpractice suits and all the settlements at University of Illinois and Cook County, and you know, they had to give me that. I mean, you know, there's I mean, it sounds like you're looking for more sort of, you know, policy and process sort of information. Maybe is that?
Well, I mean, I can think of a lot of different story
Yeah.
ideas, but all
Yeah.
of them would kind of revolve around data. You know,
Yeah,
you have
right.
to get to some quantifiable information to be able to even begin to report a story, frankly.
Yeah,
So,
but yeah, I mean, they're subject to FOIA.
yeah. So that, so you'd just be like working with the public information officer at the university medical center.
I mean, you know, depending on what you're trying to do, I mean, to sort of strategize what you think you can get, and, you know, and then if for some reason they ask for clarification, which they often do, or if for some reason they say, I was gonna address this anyway, if they say it's too burdensome, then you can work to narrow the request. I run into a lot of times where they say, this is too much for us to do, and I say, okay, well, let's talk, and they're kind of off the clock for, you know, the time being, but then we decide, okay, I'm gonna narrow this request. You know, a lot of times it's like, you know, instead of 10 years of information, I'm seeking 5 years of information or something like that. And then, you know, usually, you know, they work with you, but, yeah, I mean, I think you just sort of have to strategize in terms of what what you think you can get, and then, you know, put the FOIA request in and go from there. You know, kind of make them tell you what you need to do to, you know, or what you can and can't get. So. I mean, the thing is, like, what was it, what did you say, FERPA?
Yeah,
There's
FERPA's, FERPA is the educational
Okay.
exemption
Yeah, that's
to
also-
FOIA requests. And anytime you're using a state university affiliated thing, it's the most common citation for why they won't provide information, because they'll claim under whatever law they can't identify any student that goes somewhere, which doesn't apply non-students, but it's
Yeah.
you'll often see it in university settings cited as an
Yeah,
exemption.
Yeah,
That sounds like a
I
thing.
recall that, the Tribune did an investigative series, I'm gonna say it was probably 7 years ago now, in terms of University of Illinois, who they admitted, right? So they looked at the outliers and said, okay, wait a minute, you're saying that this is your criteria, why did you admit this person down here? And it was a big story, and my recollection is the Tribune had to sue them. I mean, it wasn't easy to get that. That should all be public information. It should be fairly readily available, frankly. But
Yeah, and I was going to mention the thing. There's a patient privacy, law with the hospitals, and so they might throw in
yeah,
that.
or
But, you know,
HIPAA.
But you're not going to name patients, and
And it's the same thing with admissions. You're not going to be naming individual students necessarily, although I think they actually did get to a certain point where they, they started to subpoena the chancellor's emails, if I'm not mistaken. I'd have to go back and read the story, but yeah, they did get to the individual level because it was a clout story, But probably the story I'm writing is when I don't think there's any clout involved in who pays what. I think it's more, I mean, it's a fairness issue.
Yeah, I mean, just look at these exemptions. I mean, so you're not going to out, individuals. You're not putting private. You're not asking for private information.
Right.
As long as it's not, burdensome or unduly burdensome. I mean, I think, knowing what they, can and can't exempt. Where we have issues, I think, a lot of times we don't really talk about this, is process and bids. I mean, don't you guys agree? I mean, it seems like that one is used a lot, like if they process in particular, so to me that's so vague, it's like, this is, a process in the decision making, and they claim an exemption there, and that's sometimes where we've got our lawyer involved.
Yeah, just one quick tip too, just generally speaking, when you're sort of anticipating a response back that says, you're kind of thinking they're gonna say, claim some sort of privacy concern, like with schools or with HIPAA, whatever it may be. One thing I usually do in those cases, like, I will specifically put in the FOIA request, like, to be clear, I am not seeking any personally identified information. Like, just lay it all out there. You're expecting this response back, so you try and attack them before you even get it. So it's just one idea.
And one thing on a healthcare request, the process and bids exemption, very well, they might have a very good case to claim that if you're talking about getting the rates that are reimbursed by a commercial payer, if it's commercial insurance, the commercial payer doesn't need to tell anyone that, and they're battling they're worried about transparency laws with hospitals because they feel that it's going to be an avenue for them to have to reveal what the negotiated rates they have at hospitals, even public hospitals. If you want to get what the hospital, it actually costs the hospital for a procedure, look for what Medicare and Medicaid are paying for that, and that might be a better indicator, and that should be publicly available. But if you're talking about what a commercial payer, like what goes through commercial insurance, they can very well put that under process and bids and say they can't give that to you.
Yeah, thanks for bringing that up. That's a really good point, because now you're dealing with, two government entities, right? So Medicare, Medicaid, and with some of these public hospitals, that's a good share of their patients anyways. Plus, it's it's the best you can do in terms of the actual public records. So.
If it's the commercial payer, it's not that's what the insurer is paying, and that's probably not what you're going after anyway, because that's not what's going through the public hospital. It's not going through the public funds and everything like that.
but also don't assume that the hospitals even know themselves.
Right.
That's exactly right. I
Yeah,
mean,
they
that's
don't.
what
They
I've
have
learned
no
over
idea.
there. Yeah,
I just
tried
did a
to-
healthcare data thing for a private company, and they don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I had some physical therapy, and I went to the location where it wasn't like, so how much did that cost? Oh, we don't know. I'm like, you don't know. I'm like trying to see how much I owed. I call my insurance company, they don't know. They're like, go talk to your provider. I go to my provider, they don't know. I mean, what are you supposed to do? I think it's a good story, you know?
Yeah, and we get a lot of, we don't know responses to, a lot of people don't know a lot of things.
And sometimes that becomes a story.
Yeah.
Yeah, but then to make it more of a, you know, instead of just an anecdotal story, I think it's actually a widespread story. I think there's, I think it's a story with, a national story, frankly. And then it's like, how do you start to report it so that,
Yeah. I mean, a lot of times what we're getting at here is data, just data to prove, to show that we're not just, as you said, counting on anecdotes. I mean, this is just the start, right? I mean, then you have to report it out and, get people to, to speak about the information you find. But, you want to talk real quick about?
Yeah, sending FOIA requests, we've kind of gone a little way along the process. They must be made in writing. You can't call someone and ask for information. It has to be delivered a number of ways. You can send it via mail, email, fax, or the web. They got to be sent to the FOIA officer, as we said before, and got a couple of things. It's got to be made for a record that's kept by the agency, so you can't ask the fire department for police department records, etc. Like, it has to be something that's kept within house. It's a good idea to keep track of your requests, and this is something that's not a bad idea. You send a number of requests out, and it's rather difficult to keep track of what day you sent it, when it's supposed to be due, what you sent for. So I often keep a spreadsheet to keep track of every FOIA I've sent. I've sent somewhere in the neighborhood of 1,700 FOIA requests in the last year, and it's difficult to keep track of those, so it's a good idea for me to keep a sheet to keep track of everything. So that's, I guess we can go a little bit more in detail of how to write the FOIA afterwards, but yeah.
You said you sent 1,700 FOIAs last year?
Yes.
Has that, we were told that you can only do one a week.
Oh.
No.
No.
No?
Well, that's.
Or do you have a FOIA bag holder? Like someone to
No.
There's a rule on individuals.
Yeah, individuals, you become what is called a voluminous requester, and then you are put to the bottom of the pile, and you're essentially the last person who is responding to something. As a journalist, there is no limit to the number of requests that you can
So
make.
it is more beneficial to be immediate.
In that instance, it is,
there's
yes.
There's a lot of instances there are, and so all journalists know, if they ever say that you're, a frequent requester or a voluminous requester, it's like, no, we're not. That doesn't apply to us. So don't. I've had that. I actually had somebody in Cook County try that with me once, but it's not true. Is there another question? One thing I'll say too is I do already FOIA by email. If somebody has access to email, if they use email, your FOIA officer, they have to take your FOIA in email, and I always ask for everything, returned to me electronically. If they can't, that's fine. They can send me a disk. They can send me. They insist on sending me a package of printed out documents. It's that's up to them. But I ask for everything returned to me electronically. I ask for specifically data in spreadsheets, Excel spreadsheets. So you can be that specific in your. I just don't see the the point of sending stuff by mail or sending stuff by fax. You can have a fax. You guys want anything else on that point? Or?
Yeah, just, you mentioned Excel. We've run into this quite a bit when we've sent payroll requests. We have a database on our website, all public employee salaries. And especially in smaller agencies, smaller towns, we'll get a response back that says, it's a PDF. And we specifically ask for it in an electronic form. And so when we push back on that, they'll say, well, we don't have to create a record for you. And as long as they have it in Excel, and a lot of times you can clearly see it originally came in Excel and they converted it to a PDF, you are still entitled to it in Excel. So the best method I think we've had in sort of combating that is to cite the actual statute where it says, if it I don't know the exact words, but it's in there.
It's provided in the format in which it originally appeared.
Yes, and like a lot of times, so I'll take that line, copy and paste it, send it them in an email, and then like, finally they'll send it back in Excel. So that's been helpful.
Yeah, read the statute, if somebody denies you for any reason, tell them to, quote the part of the statute that they're using to deny you. Push back, always push back, because, these people are not always in your corner. In fact, they're never in your corner. If you want, I think this is gonna go up online, right?
Yeah.
Somewhere.
Got a video for
This is
everybody.
our lawyer, Matt Topic. He's very good. He's the guy responsible for getting the McDonald, video released. So you can watch Matt discuss how to write a FOIA request.
Is this on BGA?
BGA,
Yeah, we'll include the
Yeah.
the link to this. We'll have them posted on the website for FOIA Fest, so you should be able to find all of these. But yeah, you'd be able to find it if you search BGA on YouTube or any of the above.
You can reach out to any of us too. You can definitely reach out to me. I'm bchase@bettergov.org.
Bchase?
Bchase, yeah, BCHASE. So
Yeah, if you want to reach me though, you have to go through my secretary.
So, do you want to?
Yeah, and I kind of gone over formatting your request, and the thing in the last slide kind of had a few. There's generators that'll generate FOIA letters for you if you're uncomfortable kind of writing them on their own. There's no specific format to writing it's hard to do a form letter to write FOIA requests, but you don't need to. You gotta put it in writing. So that's the ultimate thing that keeps track of everything. You don't need to use a standard form. You probably don't need to give a reason for what you're doing. There's no you have to explain. I'm gonna put it in an expose blockbuster story on CBS, or I'm a concerned citizen. It's equally valid claim, and if they ask you, you don't have to tell them. Include your name and contact information so that they can get a hold of you, so that they can send the things to you. And kind of the boilerplate starter that I have for here is under the Illinois Freedom of Information Act. I'm requesting ellipses. So whatever you're requesting after that kind of starting point.
Yes, let me be clear on that. You don't have to, you get a flag calling you back and saying, hey, what are you working on? How can I help you? Can I set up some interviews for you? It's like they're just fishing. And it's like, I have to say, for reporters, we say, I'm working on some research for a possible story, and then leave it at that. They don't have to, you can use your FOIA requests, your responses for wallpaper. It's like, it's not their, they can't bully you into telling you what exactly you're working on. Obviously, when you point talking to the PR person when you get it, or the, head of the agency or whatever, then you're going to be a little more transparent. Yeah.
Please. Can you tell some more examples of being denied under the unduly burdensome? We've had some discussion about that recently, and I was curious.
Yeah,
to know whatever else they
just
use.
whenever they've got this, like, a huge amount of data over, a period of time, so let me think. I wanted to, let's say I wanted, EPA, citations, violations over, 10-year period of time over a bunch of different, maybe I'm zeroing on one specific industry, and they just say it's too much, and I say, well, okay, then, how about 5 years, or, or whatever, it's like, but whenever they have just so much, to work with, and some, a lot of times you don't know, right? I don't know. I don't know if it's going to be, I did something in the governor's office. So Governor Honor allegedly doesn't use email, right? So, but he has people around him, that do, and so I was looking for a specific, industry-specific thing. I came up with about half a dozen, keywords, and I just asked for, emails from the top 3 or 4 advisors, I think, and just went back to the beginning of this administration, which was, January 2015, right? So they came back with me and said they had more like 11,000, responsive documents, so I have to narrow that, for them. So, like, email is a big one too, it's like, you're probably going to be fishing with email, right? You don't know, you know what you're looking for, but you need to have, you need to have yourself covered, right? So you have lots of keywords and you have lots of, maybe in some cases, lots of people. And, a lot of times you'll be over a long period of time. So it's really just condensing, and, that doesn't stop you from, just, filing that, narrowing that, and then you go back, to them with another, FOIA request. It's like, okay, you give me 3 years, and then then you get that back, and then you ask for the next 3 years. So. Right, yeah?
I have never filed a FOIA request. Can you guys ballpark, like, how long the first part of the process might take where you file the request, and then you wait to either get the info or hear that they can't because...
Yeah, so again, I recommend email, and, you can, some people even say, I always assume they know this, but, if you just want to remind them, it's like, expect to get your request within 5 days as law, as law dictates. But yeah, within 5 business days, you're supposed to get a response from them, and they either say, here's what we got, or they could reject you, or they could say, we need this extension. Or they could say, I need you to narrow this, work with us to narrow it, so it would be really burdensome. But they gotta respond to you in 5 days, and just, look at your calendar. It's like business days, weekends don't count, obviously, and then bug them, where's my response, and sometimes I get responses at, 5:30 on the day that it's due, but, they're not supposed to take more than 10 days, so they're violation law. Yeah.
Is there a limit to how long the FOIA officer can respond and say that they need more time? Because I've been looking on Muckrock at somebody who did FOIA personnel records for Amtrak, and I think it's been 2 years.
Federal. Yeah.
If it's federal, it's a lot
So federal
longer
is
than
a whole
Illinois.
other game.
Okay.
It's like they don't really have a time limit.
Okay.
I mean, they're supposed to get back to you within a certain period of time, but usually it's like just they acknowledge, and then I'm waiting for some federal FOIAs I filed years ago. And it's, it sucks. But then again, I mean, a colleague of mine just put a FOIA in for an agency that gave her something within a few weeks. So you never know. Now, one thing that helps you on the federal front is if it's already been, if somebody else out there has already done that FOIA, then they have the documents. They could still take months, but it will speed up the process. So if you know that somebody else did a similar FOIA, and they don't really have to recreate it. But federal FOIA is very demanding. I mean, in Illinois FOIA, it's like, it's not the best, but it's certainly not the worst. Like, friend Casey here worked in Alabama.
Yeah.
Good FOIA state? Bad
Yeah,
FOIA state?
Alabama is the worst FOIA state. I mean, it makes this seem perfect. And like for example, like if you want to get a police report that'll spell out, if someone got shot, there was some terrible court ruling that said you could only get the first page of it. So they began moving all the information to the other pages. If you put in a request to the prison system, they'll charge you $25 to even begin the process of doing it, and that doesn't even guarantee you'll get anything. And when I was there, I asked for like a list of all the employees that worked in the prison system. And at first they said they wouldn't give it to me, and then they said they'd only give it to me, but it could only be printed. So they wanted me to buy 10,000 printed pages for $5,000.
Oh my goodness.
So all these rules aren't all FOIA law isn't fair, but Illinois is better than some states. So use it as your friend.
Yeah. Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. In another state I'd worked in, and it was important to address requests to, along with maybe any FOIA officer, to the keeper of the records. So if you're requesting emails to that person as well, is that something that is, like if you're requesting emails, do you make it just to the FOIA officer of the agency, or would you also actually address that request to that individual?
Yeah,
The FOIA officer would be in control of it, and all FOIA requests in Illinois are supposed to be made to the FOIA officer.
Okay.
You sometimes run into the obstacle where you don't, like I said before, you don't know who the FOIA officer is, so a lot of times, like you get to a smaller agency, like a downstate school or something like that, I'll sometimes send requests to the superintendent of the district or things like that.
Yeah, sometimes those are and a lot of times these small towns, small suburbs, they have outside counsel. In those cases, they're a real pain in the ass. They're like, there's some firms, I don't know, should we name them? Like Ansel Glick, I mean, they're like, there's firms that they work with a lot of suburbs, and they can be a little obstinate, and, of course, they're, getting paid by the hour, so, if they help deny your FOIA, then, they get paid more, yeah.
I work for smaller towns in small suburbs, and so as far as like calling people to find out who the FOIA officer is, is that an option? Like could I call the superintendent and like, do you know who the school
Yeah.
is?
Yeah.
You should be able to call, district office or city hall or whatever and say, I mean, ideally, and I guess there's no law that,
It's supposed to be listed on a
It's supposed to
website.
be on the website.
But some schools make it very difficult to find it. You have to be quite a detective.
Frankly, there's a lot of ignorance out there. I one time did a FOIA at a small community hospital, I got a call from their outside counsel saying that they weren't subject to FOIA because they weren't federal government. And there was state FOIA, and I had explained that to her. So, sometimes you have to, just do a little research to figure out who you're going to contact. Yeah.
If you didn't receive a response and you have to contact public access counselor, is that the one from the state of Illinois, or is that the one?
That's the Attorney General's office.
Yeah, it works for the Attorney General.
Should we, we'll get
We can
we'll get to that in just a second.
yes,
Let me
skip
see if
through
there's-
or-
I'm not blowing off, it's like, we're gonna get to that in
No,
2
I
seconds.
found there's Sarah Pratt.
Yes.
Yeah, that's it. So she's part of the AG's office, and, it's a mixed bag whether you can, they're useful or not. I mean, so, I don't know, let's see, you have a little bit about formulating, I try to keep it, simple, here's who I am, you name the affiliation, I just usually say, under FOIA I'm requesting, and then, maybe we'll spend 2 seconds here on like, things like documents sufficient to show, you want to be very specific. I told you about these FOIA committees, because there are people that are going to say, he didn't specifically say he wanted this, so we'll give him, so you just want to be as clear as you can possibly be. Always, if it's for, a news story or other, public good, make sure you say that. For media, I ask that, any fees be waived as law allows. Please convey the information electronically to my email address. You can say, contact me with any questions. I try to be kind of polite. All right, then.
Yeah, and these are the types he's kind of gone over, being specific about documents. You got 3 types of general documents. I want all documents related to this, whatever the subject is you're researching. Specific requests, I want the contract between the school district and such construction. Parameter-based requests, all documents between X and Y date. I want all the emails between January 1st and February 25th. 2017. I want all the correspondence between Rahm Emanuel and person X. I mean, these sorts of parameter requests. So these are essentially how you define and it's a good idea to do that in your FOIA request.
Here we go. We have. You want to go through this real quick?
Yeah, the focus request. The government's not required to answer questions or create records. Like, you can't call them up and say, oh, you got to do this, but you can frame your request in order to obtain the information. You have a couple of phrases we're using here. We want documents sufficient to show blank, policies and procedures related to. So you're not asking a question. You're essentially asking for public information that they can provide in these forms. Ask for the documents in the form you wanted, as we said before. Ask for things in electronic format, even the file format that you'd like to receive them in. And if you're asked to narrow the request, ask questions so you can get the exact information you want. That was kind of on the somebody says that you get, it's too burdensome to produce. Maybe you can go, hey, instead of 10 years, give me 5. Hey, instead of all the communication between these 10 people, how about just these 3? Try to find a way that you can still get the information without taking the denial as the end of the road.
Yeah, we also like to use language like any and all documents. You know what you want. You say including but not limited to. Try to think out what you may be excluding in your own request. No, we talked about the 5 days. I don't think we need to go over this anymore. Here's the thing about the copies. You know, media always say this is for a news story. As such, I'm asking for a waiver as law allows for any fees. I mean, I've hardly paid any fees over the last 3 years. I can't really think of too many. If you're denied,
Yeah, these probably get into our like public access counselor sort of discussions, but if you're denied, you're entitled to a written denial of your request, so that's something that you have to get. Insist on an explanation, kind of ask them why you were denied, try to get to the bottom of it, so maybe you can get a different answer with something else. And you gotta be consistent on it. You gotta keep looking for the answer, even if they don't give it back to you. It's good to keep following up until you get the answer you want on the denial.
And then the next steps, when you say accept, that means, maybe you've learned something and if you have an outright denial, maybe you figure out how you can rewrite the FOIA and resubmit it. I've done that a lot of times. And then here's the public access counselor. You should be able to find that, on the Attorney General's website. They actually say that too in their denial letter. If you feel like this is a denial, then, here you can. And they give you Sarah Pratt's contact information at the Attorney General's office. And then, of course, if you're lucky enough to have a lawyer, or you are a lawyer, or if you're just suing yourself, file a lawsuit against the body. Here's the stuff about the public.
Yeah, and the public access counselor issues binding or non-binding decisions in the disputes. You submit a written request to the public access counselor. The public body that you're arguing with then submits their response to your record. You respond to their comeback, and then the public access counselor issues a decision. It's essentially that either a binding decision means that they are forced to comply with it. A non-binding decision is more of a suggestion that someone complies with the records request. And we've got the link to the public access counselor's site. Like Brett said, there's a lot of times the information will be provided in a FOIA denial letter.
Just one other option too when you get denied. I've had some success, especially in smaller agencies, where if you're fairly certain you should get the records, go above the FOIA officer. So this would be before reaching out to the PAC's office, but go to the mayor or ask for their attorney. I know we did mention some attorneys are bad, but not all of them. Sometimes I'll ask, who's your attorney? And once you talk to that person, it's like, oh, okay, they made a mistake, like you should get those records. So, just see how you can sort of move up the food chain and try and get what you want too.
And you can often find attorneys who are willing to take some claims pro bono, sort of on some sort of interest. If there's somebody that works in freedom of information law and they're willing to take your case on, there's also organizations that will fund lawsuits up to a certain point. So even if your organization or you as a person don't have a attorney working for you, there are sometimes ways to get someone to get that ball started rolling down the road.
All right, so reach out to INHOPs.
Yeah, and we're going to have them post this on their website, so any of the links and things that are in here will be available to everybody after this. So.